All right, people, we're going to go for the top five most annoying fish, at least to me. Now, this will be different from many other people, but at least to me, the top five most annoying fish that get in my way when I'm actually trying to fish for other fish. So, at number five, and this might be somewhat heretical, we have the walleye for me. Now, a lot of you target walleye. Walleye are great tasting. If I'm fishing for dinner, these aren't annoying. These are the ones I want. But if I'm fishing for flatheads, especially on the sugar and the pecatonica, these things are extremely annoying because they will bite every single bait I throw out there for flatheads, whether it's worms, whether it's bluegills, or whether it's those small suckers. They will bite literally all of them. Like on the Sugar River, I throw out like a 7-inch rock bass, like a 13-inch walleye will come up and take a snap at it, and sometimes it'll pull it off the hook. It can't hook. The small walleye can't hook. I mean, most of the ones I hook are like 19, 20 inches. And those are the ones that actually hook on my like 5-aught or something. But most of the small ones, they never hook, but they steal my bait. So that's why walleye are annoying to me because they steal both my channel and flathead catfish bait. And these things will bite worms, they'll bite cut bait, and they will bite live bait. And they are very, very aggressive at night, which is when I fish for most gato fish. So that's why they're kind of annoying to me. The big ones are pretty welcome because I can actually reel them in. They make pretty good content and they taste very good. But the smaller ones, very, very annoying. Anything below 15 inches, very, very annoying to me. So that is number five on my list. Number four on my list, probably the most common fish on both the Wisconsin and the Rock. And not a big problem for catfish, but when I'm fishing for sturgeon in September, oh yeah, it is a big, big problem. Of course, the fish I'm talking about is the freshwater drum. That's right. Probably the most numerous fish on both the Wisconsin and the Rock. I know they're in Lake Monona and Mendota as well. I've never caught one in Monona. I've caught several off Mendota. But yeah, so essentially, the problem with fishing for sturgeon in September is these things. They are so numerous and they bite my worms like every 5 minutes. I cannot keep a worm in the water in September in a lot of the stretches of the Wisconsin, which is where I generally fish for lake sturgeon. Now, lake sturgeon like to eat worms more than anything else. And that obviously presents a big problem because I don't really want to catch a drum when I'm fishing for sturgeon. I actually want to catch sturgeon. And this gets in the way, and I've blown through boxes and boxes of worms trying to hook sturgeon and getting tons and tons of drum. That's the only time they've really been a problem for me for freshwater drum. Because otherwise, like I'm really fishing for catfish, I can just cut them up and catfish will take them. But for lake sturgeon, they don't really bite on cut drum all that often. So yeah, and the thing is, I've tried using minnows or shrimp for sturgeon, which sturgeon will bite. But guess what? The freshwater drum bite those as well. So that doesn't really help me. So that's why they're number four on my list. Number three is a fish that many of you will find annoying. It is semi-invasive. It's been here for so long that DNR actually classifies them as native, but they are not natively from here. And of course, the fish I'm talking about is the common carp. Carp are everywhere in Wisconsin. Thankfully, we don't have the Asian carp, so they're not on this list because I don't really ever see them in Wisconsin. But if you go down to like Missouri, like you'll see them everywhere, or anywhere on the lower parts of the Mississippi. But anyways, Asian carp. Common carp, very annoying. They're in all the systems. They eat corn. They eat worms. They're only number three because I actually don't mind them a lot of times. They put up a really good fight. They're pretty good. They're pretty big. And a lot of times I do actually go fishing specifically for big carp because they are very, very fun to catch. But they are kind of invasive. They do actually stir up the sediment for other fish. So they're not very good in terms of like quality of water wise. But they're not as bad as Asian carp, and they are a lot of fun to reel in. The problem with the Asian carp is they don't really bite anything. I mean, they'll bite the curly-tailed grubs every once in a while, but they're filter feeders. Common carp are not filter feeders. They will pick up worms, but that's also the problem, because in places where there's both catfish and carp, carp will actually pick up worms. And the problem with carp is a lot of them are too big for me to really want to cut up. It takes so much effort. And if I like put a carp head on a hook, like it takes a really, really freaking big catfish to actually eat it. Whereas like some of the smaller suckers, if you cut them up, they make really good bait for all kinds of catfish. So common carp, their size is actually a plus because they're fun to reel in. It's also kind of a minus sometimes though, because they just are really, really hard to cut up for bait unless you have like a really big knife with you. I usually have a small switchblade with me. It doesn't work quite all that well for cutting up common carp. So third most annoying fish on the list. They are everywhere. They muddy up the water. And yeah, they eat worms, which is like one of my primary baits. And they are a little too big for me to cut up most of the time. The second most annoying fish to me is actually a native fish. They're in Wisconsin and Missouri, but I mainly have trouble with them in Missouri, but I have a lot of trouble with them in Missouri. They are a toothy fish, and it is, of course, the short-nosed gar, not the long-nosed gar. Long-nosed gar I can tolerate more because I can hook them more easily on like the bigger circle hooks, and I've hooked like a 50-incher and like several bigger ones, and they're kind of fun to pull in. Short-nosed gar don't really grow all that big, so they're just kind of annoying. They're very, very aggressive towards bait, and they rarely hook on the circle hooks I use to fish for catfish, and they will bite literally everything that catfish bite, besides the stink bait, but I rarely ever use stink bait because I like fishing for big catfish, and stink bait is not my go-to bait for really large catfish. I like using cut bait. I like using live bait when fishing for big blues, big flatheads, and these things just gobble those things up like crazy. Drives me absolutely insane. They are everywhere on the Missouri, the Mississippi, and the Merrimack, so I cannot stand short-nosed gar. They are on the Wisconsin too, on the lower Wisconsin, and also around the Dells, but they're not as big of a problem in Wisconsin for me as they are in Missouri. Because I can just go fish on the rock, the bark, and the sugar. They don't have the gar. But in Missouri, you cannot avoid them. Every puddle of water has one of these stupid things. And yes, they are native. I understand they do eat like baby Asian carp, and that's a plus. But still, very, very annoying to me. And the most annoying fish is a fish that needs to be eradicated without mercy. And they are completely invasive to the Great Lakes. And they eat literally everything I throw. Small baits, that is. And of course, I'm talking about the round goby. I hate these things. This weekend, I was fishing, or like on July 4th, I was fishing in Lake Michigan, and they kept on stealing my my worms. And they'll steal tiny bits of worm as well as bigger pieces of worm. And the thing is, most of these are so small, they can't even hook on my smallest hook, which is like a number 8 or a number 10. And they're like tiny, you can tell by that. But the problem is, I was like, okay, so I'll throw corn because nothing generally bites corn. And carp bite corn, and I was fishing for the big carp. Usually if I throw corn out there, like bluegills and perch, they won't bite it. So like the carp are free to bite it. But no, gobies actually bite corn. So there's actually nothing I can throw out there for the carp that the gobies won't bite. Obviously, they can't bite giant chunks of cut bait, but I'm not really going to fish with giant chunks of cut bait in Lake Michigan if I'm fishing for carp. Thought about throwing some of the alewives that were lying around shore out there, but I ended up just trying with the corn and also with the worms. And you cannot get away from these things. They're also very invasive and they're bad for the native ecosystem, so they need to be eradicated. Unfortunately, they're impossible to eradicate. So they are my number one most annoying fish. So let me know what your thoughts are on the most annoying fish when you're fishing. I bass and stuff didn't make the list because bass hook very easily, and I don't mind pulling bass in, obviously. But those fish are just fish that get in the way, and sometimes they're hard to hook. In the case of the carp, they're not hard to hook at all. They're just kind of big and they eat everything and they're everywhere. And they're a little too big for me to use as cut bait most of the time. But all the other stuff, let me know what you think. What are your most annoying fish while you're fishing? And I will see you on the next fishing adventure. Probably in Richland Center, but maybe somewhere out west. If not, it'll be on the Bark or the Rock or the Wisconsin. I will see you guys later.